And the next talk is by Deepika Bolimpale. I hope she is with us.
Yes, yes.
Okay, perfect. And the topic is variability in accretion flows, comparison of numerical simulations with observations. So Deepika,
After the
please.
introduction, I'll go ahead and share the screen. Is it visible?
Yeah.
Perfect. Thanks. Hello, everyone. Today I'm planning to talk about the variability in accretion flows. And in particular, I would like to show you how we can compare the results from the numerical simulations to the observations. So the work that I'm going to present is has been basically carried out partly at College of Charleston at SAMC, and right now I just joined as a postdoc at Max Planck Institute for Astrophysics in Garching. So here is the outline for the today's talk, which is I'm going to start with a brief introduction to X-ray binaries and what types of variability do we see in those systems. And then I'll move on to talk a little bit more about what observations are showing us, particularly the kind of broadband variability that we see in these systems. And then I'll mention the theoretical model, specifically propagating fluctuations model that has been invoked to explain all the features that are observed in this broadband variability. And then I'll move to the main part where I'll present you with the simulations that have been performed in the interest of understanding the propagating fluctuations in simulations. And finally, I'll conclude with a brief note on possible future work. So X-ray binaries, as we already discussed a lot in this conference, basically, this is a closed binary system where you have the compact object like black hole or neutron star accreting matter from a companion star, either through a Roche lobe overflow or through wind, mostly just allowing. Uh, and in such cases, because the matter that is all leaving this companion star already carries certain angular momentum with it, when it comes under this gravitational, under the influence of the gravitational force of this compact object, it forms disk-like structures. And due to the viscous and turbulence in these disks, most of the gravitational energy is radiated or converted into the heat and radiated away, and most of this radiation happens very close to the compact object and is mostly observed in the X-rays. Um, so with a lot of data that has been accumulated in the past few years, a lot of interesting variability phenomena have been observed in this black hole X-ray binaries. So here I'm showing you an example of two X-ray light curves of two different black hole X-ray binary systems. The top panel is basically showing you a light curve of a transient low mass X-ray binary source, where you can see this peaks and dips, and these are basically this system in particular is transient because it undergoes this outburst, different outbursts, which are triggered by the disk instabilities in the accretion disk. And along with this variation in the luminosity by orders of magnitude, it also shows different spectral variations, which I'll come to in a minute. Now, there is another kind of source like Cygnus X1, which is a typical example for a persistent high mass X-ray binary source, where you do not see any high variations in the luminosity, but of course, there are still spectral transitions that are observed in this system. So what I'm showing you here are the red dot points are basically representing a soft state, which and the blue points are representing the hard state. What I mean by that is that along with the luminosity, as I said, you see also variations in the power in the energy spectra. So by a high soft state, it would imply that the peak in the energy is mostly in the lower ranges, typically between 2 to 10 keV. And in a low hard state, you would have a more thermal, non-thermal power law, which is where most of the energy is coming at very high energies with a peak above 100 keV. And this is thought to be coming from a Compton emission. And there have been models that have been invoked to explain these spectral transitions, and one of the well-known is a truncated disk model, where in the low Hart state, it's typically thought of having a corona in the inner region, which is surrounded by a truncated standard thin disk-like structure outside. So this corona, since it's optically thin and geometrically thick, it's radiatively inefficient. So any of the seed photons that are coming from this outer disk are Comptonized by these hot electrons. So they scatter these, the photons get upscattered, and then they are emitted in hard X-ray band. So that's why you are expected to see this hard, a lot of power and high energies. Now, as the accretion rate increases, it's expected that the disk sweeps in till the ISCO, and you no more have this radiatively inefficient, geometrically thick disk, but you just have end up having a standard Sakura Sunya type disk, in which and this happens in a soft state, where this being a optically thick standard thin disk, it would be emitting soft photons, which is basically implying that the most of the energy that you observe is typical of a black body radiation and is observed at lower energies. Now, the reason I'm mentioning you these states is because if you look at the power spectra during this different spectral transitions, what you see, I'm showing you the top panel, which are showing you the power spectra for two different sources in low Hart state, while the bottom two panels are showing you the power spectra of again, these same sources in the high soft state. Now you can see that when the source is going from the low Hart to high soft state, you do see a change in the power spectra. This is basically, you take the Fourier transform of the light curve, and then you obtain this power spectra. So you see that the very important thing that you can notice is that there is this flat continuum band of power over a range of frequencies, and this becomes this is well pronounced in the low Hart states, whereas it doesn't exist significantly in the high soft states. There are additional features, like in the panel F, you see the bottom rightmost, where you can see the QPO-like features be appearing in the soft states. Now, what I want to focus in this talk is basically this continuum band of power that you see in the low Hart states of this black hole X-ray boundaries, which we call as broadband variability. And what it means is, again, I'm showing you an example of light curve of a particular source. And if you look at the topmost panel, you can see variations over hundreds of scales or time scales of hundreds of seconds. And you keep zooming in, and what you see is, as you zoom in even down to the scale of milliseconds, you can still find variations on those time scales. Now, it's intuitive that once you make a Fourier transform of such a light curve, which shows variability on a broad range of time scales, you would expect something, a frequency, a power spectrum, which shows a continuum band of power. Now, along with this feature that you see in the power spectra, you also notice there are certain observational characteristic features for this variability, such as strong coherence, frequency-dependent time lags, and also log normal distribution and linear RMS flux relation that are observed for the distribution of fluxes. I'll come to these in more detail in a few minutes. But before that, I would like to mention that this is not just observed in the black hole X-ray boundaries. This has been discussed and observed in various other systems like protostar systems, white dwarfs in CVs, of course, for black hole and neutron star systems, and AGNs as well, although the timescales are quite huge in such cases because the black hole is supermassive. Recent observations have also pointed that there are gamma ray burst sources that show this kind of variability. So it's ubiquitous, and this suggests us something that it's not common to the compact object, but it must be something that occurs in the surroundings of the compact object. And the immediate thing that comes to our mind is accretion. So it is thought that this variability is originated because in the accretion disks. And so the model has been the model that has been invoked to explain these observations is indeed based on the indeed based on the processes that happen in the accretion disk. So this model, called propagating fluctuation model, and is the main essence of this model is that you have accretion rate fluctuations that are generated at different radii and different time scales. And now these fluctuations propagate inwards and modulate the fluctuations that are generated at inner radii. So in such way, the fluctuations are coupled together, which kind of explains the multiplicative behavior in the accretion rate. What I mean by that is, so if you take the light curve, mostly because the emission happens close to the black hole, you take the light curve and then you make a distribution of the flux. What you find in observations is that it shows a nice log normal profile. Where is this coming from? So as I said, you have the accretion rate fluctuations that are generated at different radii. So as they are propagating in and modulating, they are basically multiplying with the fluctuations that are generated in a radii. So this multiplication is what produces this log normal profile. Now, what goes in hand with this log normal profile is the linear RMS flux relation. So basically, when you take the light curve again, you bin it up, you compute the RMS and the mean flux in each bin, and then you make a plot of it. What you see is this nice linear relation between these two quantities. And what it's saying is that the more the brighter the source is, the more variable it is. And this is something fundamental because as you recollect from the previous slides, that you do have this black hole X-ray binaries are not stationary, but they undergo quite various outburst states, during which the energy spectra also varies, like the hard state, soft state, and so on. But this linear RMS flux relation is something that is observed in all these different states. So it's more fundamental, although the slope of this relation changes during the states, but it's present every time. There are also other things that are observed, such as strong coherence. So what I mean is that you take, again, the light curve that is observed in two different energy bands. So let's say closer to the black hole, you would expect more of hard photons or harder photons or high energy photons. Or and away from the black hole, you would expect photons with lesser energy. Now you take these two light curves and you try measuring the coherence between them. And then what you see is that there is a strong coherence, at least up to a certain frequency. So a quick note is the way you measure simply coherence is basically if you have two different light curves, then or data points, you just make a Fourier transform of them, and then you come from the cross spectrum, you can simply compute the coherence. Now, if there's a strong coherence, one can find the lags, phase lags between them, and so forth, the time lags. And interestingly, it's been found that the hard photons lag the soft photons. So basically, if you try to plot a lag between hard and soft emissions, you can see a nice, the lags are positive. And on top of that, there is a nice frequency dependency of these lags, frequency dependency. Now, what causes this frequency dependency is something that we will discuss at the end of this talk. So this is so forth. I've mentioned you how what are the observations, and also how the model that has been based on this propagating fluctuations explains these observational features. This sounds a perfect fit story, but what remains unexplored is that there is still something that we don't know what's driving these fluctuations in this accretion disk. Could it be the turbulence, basically coming from the MRA? And also, now that we are in the era where we can do numerical simulations to try reproducing the disks close to what might be happening in the nature, it's I think it's high time that we can try to test and study if these fluctuations are indeed observed in our numerical simulations. So this is what we wanted to do, and we started with non-radiative general relativistic magnetohydrodynamic simulations. And here I'm showing you just a snapshot. I'm sure many of the audience are familiar with the simulations, but I'm still showing you a simple example of how the initial configurations look like in the simulations. So here is, I'm showing you that the color is basically representing the density, and the black contours are basically showing you the magnetic field lines. So we start with a rotating hydrostatic equilibrium torus, which is governed basically by the gravity, pressure, and the centrifugal forces. And then you tread it with the weak magnetic fields because such that it's susceptible to MRI. So with MRI is basically what is the source of turbulence. This magnetorotational instability, the main essence of it is that if you have a conducting plasma and which is treated with the magnetic fields, and you introduce a small perturbation in it, as shown in this cartoon, the magnetic field line acts as a spring, so it tries to restore the particles into the previous orbit. But since the blue particle is closer to the black hole, it rotates with higher angular velocity compared to the red one, which is further away from the black hole. So this spring kind of puts a retarding force on the blue particle, trying to slowing it down, while exerts a positive torque on the red particle, trying to increase its speed. In this process, what happens is that the blue particle further loses its angular momentum and then sweeps in, while the red particle gains angular momentum and moves further out. So in this way, MRA has been studied, simulated well in the literature, and it's known to act. It's known to be a source of the turbulence, providing or aiding in accretion flow. So as I said, once we start with the simulation, MRA grows and it produces turbulence, which basically helps in transporting the angular momentum outwards and thus aiding in accretion. Now the question, as you can see, you may already guess from from a snapshot of the simulation at later time that we are simulating geometrically thick, optically thin flows. And the reason why we are doing it, because it suits, it's known to well explain the low Hart state of the black hole X-ray binaries, because these are optically thin and radiatively inefficient flows. And secondly, if you remember, the viscous timescales is inversely proportional to the scale height. So since the characteristic timescales that are observed in this in the black hole X-ray binaries are too large for the thin disks. So basically only the thick disks can explain these timescales. Now, the snapshot that I showed you in the previous slide is just for a simulation D, which is only one of the simulations that we used in this work from the pool of the 5 different simulations. And you can see that one thing always important to do such a timing analysis is that you would need a lot of data so that you can average of the noise from whatever power spectra you're trying to compute. So for that reason, we required simulations which are run for quite a long time, like A, B, C, and R. And also it's important that the dump interval must be low so that you have more data points for a given run length. So the simulations A, B, and C have been run by using Athena++, and R has been run by Han, by Navnesh Narayan, and the D is the simulation D we performed using Cosmos++, just for the interest of this project. And one of the important things is the difference in the magnetic field configuration. So as you can see, the initial configurations for the magnetic field are different for for these simulations. And here I'm showing just the snapshots of the initial magnetic field configurations. So simulation R in the middle and the B at the bottom right have multiple poloidal loops with alternating polarity. So this helps if you have alternating polarity, um, the outcome, the end result of the simulation would have uh, less magnetic flux accumulated towards the black hole. Now, simulation D, we only had a single single poloidal loop. So this is different from B and R. And in simulation A and C, they had multiple loops along the poloidal angles, and these are also of alternating polarity. So why I said these magnetic field configurations are important is because in the particular paper that Chris White studied in 2020, the simulation A, B, and C, which have different configurations, end up showing different flow configurations at the end. So simulation A and C, which had these multiple loops above and below the equatorial plane, ended up having inflows along the polar regions, and they had massive outflows in the equatorial region, where you typically expect the disk. They end up having outflows. While simulation B, uh, which has multiple loops but with alternating polarity, it has polar outflows, but also it doesn't seem to show much of inflow that you would typically expect in the disk. But simulation R and D show proper equatorial, although I do not have a picture here, but the simulation R and D show proper disk equatorial inflows and polar outflows. Now, I just want to quickly mention that it's an advantage of having all these simulations with different flow configurations is that this would help us also study how robust the propagating fluctuations would be if they exist in the simulations. Now, all we need from the simulations is an accretion rate measured over all the time scales and at different radii. And this, we take it as a proxy for the luminosity because these are non-radiative simulations. And the main question that we would like to answer is how well this accretion rate from the numerical simulations would be able to reproduce these variability features that are observed in the black hole X-ray binaries. This is the main question. Now, to start with, the first thing, if we recollect, the important thing is whether we see the coherence. Now, in observations, what you see is a strong coherence between two different X-ray energy bands. Now, since we do not have the luminosity, what we can take it as, we can take the accretion rate measured at one radius and the accretion rate measured at the other radius and try to measure the coherence between them, which is exactly what we do. An example I'm showing you here is you take the inner R1 as inner horizon and the outer radius R2 somewhere around 20 or 10 RG. And then you try to measure the coherence between them. And you can do it for all radii, comparing basically the coherence between the horizon and all other outer radii. And what you end up is with this plot, where I'm showing you the coherence plots for all 5 simulations, but let me walk you through one simulation first. So the black dashed line is the viscous frequency. The white curve is basically the Keplerian frequency. And the red region, which means a strong coherence close to 1, is nicely observed below the viscous frequency. So what this means is that there's a strong coherence at all frequencies, for all radii below their local viscous frequencies. So if you, and it drops, and the coherence drops drastically above the viscous frequency. So for example, if you're comparing the m dot at 30 RG and comparing the coherence with m dot at the inner horizon, you can only say that these two m dot are coherent below the viscous frequency at 30 Rg. What this is very interesting because in this this supports the theory of propagating fluctuations, because only the fluctuations that are below the viscous generated at the fluctuations generated at 30 Rg could be of any frequencies, but only those which are below the viscous frequency at 30 Rg propagate inwards. That's why you see this strong coherence. Now that we say we do see a hint or a support of propagating fluctuations, the first thing that we would like to look at is the lags. And so here I'm showing you for two simulations, basically the lags measured between 2 and 15 Rg, 6 and 15 Rg, and 10 and 15 Rg. So basically I'm trying to show you the lags of M measured from m dot between these radii. And the dashed black line, the vertical line, is showing you the viscous frequency at 15 Rg. So the first thing that we see is that the lags are positive, which is good, which means that the at least below the viscous frequency of 15 Rg, you see positive lags, which is good in the sense that this tells you for sure that the fluctuations are propagating inwards, basically from 15 to 2 Rg or 15 to 6 Rg. So yeah, the variability at smaller radii is basically lagging the variability at larger radii. But as you may have noted, one thing for sure is that these these lags are not frequency dependent. In the observations, you might see a nice frequency dependent lags, but in simulations, these lags are almost constant in respect to frequency. And this is probably because when in simulations, we would typically expect that the lags would correspond to the propagation time between from one radius to another radius. So this this propagation time is probably not expected to be dependent of any frequency. So what we think is that in the process that basically converts this m dot into radiation, basically through the radiative processes, these could be selective to certain frequencies, and that's where you probably introduce this frequency dependency in the lags. But the take-home message is that in the simulations we do not see any frequency dependent lags just from the accretion rate. And one thing, and the last two things that if we remember is the log normal distribution and the linear RMS relation. So wherever the simulations are stationary, where the m dot is stationary, we can try to look for the distribution of the accretion rate. And then here I'm showing you the distribution in green histograms. And we fitted it by log normal in blue curve and the normal or Gaussian in the red dashed line. And we can see that the simulations are well fit by a log normal distribution. So this indeed suggests that whatever the variability process that is producing these fluctuations is multiplicative in nature. And we can also try to find the relation between the sigma RMS and the mean accretion rate in the simulations, and we do find a nice linear relationship. Although I should mention that the slopes that we get are a little smaller compared to the observations. But again, I would take this with a grain of salt because this is simply the accretion rate and not the luminosity. But still, it's nice to see that there is a nice linear relationship. And the main part is the power spectra, of course, because whenever we try to study variability, it's also important that we look at the power spectra. So here I'm showing you for one simulation, again, the power spectra obtained from the m dot at 3 different radii. The blue one is for the 2 Rg, and the orange one is for the 10 Rg, and the green one is for the 20 Rg. And the dashed lines basically are marking the viscous frequencies for these different radii. So the first thing and that we note is that the spectra are quite coherent for these 3 radii are quite coherent below the local viscous frequency. So what I mean is that if you take the spectra of 2, 10, and 20 Rg, all seem to have similar power, at least till the point of the viscous frequency of 20 Rg. And beyond that, only the 2 and the 10 Rg seem to maintain this coherence or the same power until the frequency of 10 Rg. So this is something that is inconsistent with the assumption of propagating fluctuations model, because the model assumes that the spectra for these radii are expected to peak at their local viscous frequencies, which is not something that we see in the simulation. And the second thing is that we do see a nice break in this frequencies at a certain frequency, but we do not find any relation between this break frequency and characteristic frequencies, such as they do not Keplerian or viscous frequency. So this break frequency is seemed to be the same for all three different radii, and it doesn't seem to correspond to any of the Keplerian or any of the viscous frequencies of this radii. So this is something we're not sure what must be causing this break frequency exactly. And then if you look at all the radii, so in the previous plot, I just showed you the power spectra of 3 radii, but now here in this plot, I'm trying to show you the power spectra for all radii up to 30 Rg. And so the y-axis is basically the frequency, and the x-axis is basically the radius. And the red curve is the viscous frequency. The green curve is the radial epicyclic, and the blue is Keplerian. So I'm trying to show you is that there is a lot of power at very high frequencies. So basically, this is the region that I'm talking about, and this must be originating probably from the P modes, or like the discoseismic modes. So in this plot from CATO 2016, you can see all possible discoseismic modes in the disk, like G mode, P mode, and these are basically similar to sound waves that propagate in these disks. And especially these P modes are propagate from above the Keplerian frequencies. They propagate in the disk above these Keplerian frequencies. So we think that this power must be coming from the P modes, because they do and they are density fluctuations, so they do appear in m dot fluctuation, m dot curve. But these are probably non-dissipative in nature, which is the reason why they may not be they may not show their imprints in the actual light curve, because maybe the radiative process is selective to this particular mode. So this is the reason probably why we do not see them in the actual observed light curves. But the one interesting point is that I'm showing you here the m dot. So the accretion rate is basically measured from the entire sphere surrounding the black hole. Now, if you try to constrain or measure accretion rate only within one scale height and try to get the power spectra out of it, we observed that this the high frequency power that I'm talking about a second ago starts to diminish. And if I constrain my accretion rate, basically measuring accretion rate only on the mid plane, then you can see a drastic drop in this high frequency power at the above this Keplerian frequency. So it's probably these modes are probably propagate or appear in the much above the midplane, or let's say higher at close to the polar region. So I think that's where most of this variability due to the discoseismic modes is coming from. So a quick review is if you look at the checklist, we do see log normality behavior in our simulations. We do see RMS linear relationship, so good. We are doing so far good on this. Of course, we do see we see a strong coherence between the accretion rate at different radii, which is also good in the sense that it's suggesting that there are propagating fluctuations. Now, there's one thing that is confusing, which is we do not see any frequency-dependent time lags. We do see time lags, positive time lags, but we do not see any frequency dependency. And if you remember, I said that this is probably something related to the viscous, the radiative processes. Probably they are introducing the frequency dependency. So what we do is, so far I've made a comparison, qualitative comparison with observations. So I would like to now make a quantitative comparison. So what we do is we try to generate synthetic light curves by assuming some emissivity profile. So here's how the light curve can be generated by just considering the region of the disk. So we took the region between two, basically the horizon and the 25 RG, and the emissivity profile is radial dependent. So and it's basically like a power law with the gamma index changing for different energy bands. And then you integrate the accretion rate basically weighted by this emissivity profile, and then you can obtain the light curves for different energy bands by just changing this gamma. So we used two different gamma values for the hard and soft energy bands, and then we generated the light curves and then tried to plot the spectra out of it. The blue curve is basically showing you the spectra for hard state, and the orange curve is showing the spectra for soft state. And the black dot points are basically the observations from Cygnus X1 hard state. So we do see nice, at least the spectra for the hard state matches quite well with the observations for Cygnus X1 hard state. Now, as I mentioned, if we have these light curves in two different energy bands, we can also try measuring the time lags between them. And the blue curve again here is showing you the time lag that has been measured between the hard and soft energy bands. And the scattered points in gray and black are showing you the observations from Novak et al. Paper for two different energy bands. So you can see the black one is basically for 8.2 to 14 keV compared to 2 to 3.9 keV. And the gray points are basically the comparison between slightly softer bands. So we do see a nice match with the magnitude of the lags, but if you notice, we retain this frequency dependency in the lags, which is important because so far from just this accretion rate, we could not see any frequency dependency. But now when you introduce this emissivity profile, it introduces this nice frequency dependency because it's basically adding different weights to different to accretion rate at different radii. So probably so probably the radiative processes are selective to the frequencies, to certain frequencies, and that's how they introduce the frequency dependency in the observed lags. So if you want to summarize in one slide, yes, we do see a nice agreement with between the simulations and the observations, especially particularly for the low hard state of Cygnus X1. But to conclude, our main motive was to use the mass accretion rate from non-radiative GR imagery simulations to test the propagating fluctuation theory, and we do find that there are propagating fluctuations in the simulations. So our simulations show strong radial coherence and positive time lags, which suggests that the propagating fluctuations are that there are inward propagating fluctuations. We do see linear RMS relation and log normal behavior, which marks that the underlying process is multiplicative and stochastic in nature. We find that the frequency dependent time lags and power spectra that we obtain from the synthetic light curves are consistent with the X-ray observations. I just want to conclude with a brief note on the future work, which is basically there is also more interesting that can be done from this, more interesting to be done in this field based, such as there has been recent studies where they have suggested that there is a strong correlation between the radio and the X-ray emission. And it would be interesting to see or carry out similar studies for maybe mad accretion disks. such that we can see what is basically powering this jet. It could be coming from, I mean, the guess would be that if you try to compute the correlation between the radio and the X-ray emissions, you can try understanding based on the lags what are the velocities of this propagating fluctuations, if the jet has been actually fed by the variability that arose in the disk, or is it something that arose at the uh, bottom of the jet. So there is, I think there is a lot that we can understand probably from trying to study the jet variability and the correlation between the jet and the disk variability. This is something we plan to do it in the future, and hopefully maybe by next track time I'll have some work to show you. Thank you, and I'm ready to take questions.
Thank you very much. It was very nice talk, and we have some time for questions. So if somebody wants to ask, please do. So maybe I will ask at least. So did you try to look for GMODs? You know, these trapped moths behind the...
Yes, that's interesting. We did not find, I mean, in the power spectra itself, we can see that we do not see uh, any power within this radial epicyclic frequency. So there, we do not see any G modes, at least in the simulations. Also, there has been a study, I think, in 2009 by Chris Reynolds, particularly looking for G and P modes in their simulations. And I think it's kind of, I don't know, established, but it's kind of now known that in the MHD simulations, the G modes are basically suppressed by the MRI. So,
Yeah, this is what
yeah.
I usually think. But could it be also that, for example, you are looking for these GMODs, you know, they have special symmetry that they are not symmetric with respect to equatorial plane. So could it be hidden in some averaging, for example, or so on, or it's for sure?
Yeah, I don't know if the G modes are basically based on are very much dependent on the axisymmetric nature.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so are there some other questions? Okay, so seems that you explained everything.
Or nothing. Sure.